Thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity and this blessing and this bounty to be able to gather around, sit down and have discussions about the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the teachings of the Quran, and inshallah walk the path of our Imams and the followers of the Imams. So as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq, we started a simple discussion last night, and that was the main question. That before we get into all of this, let's say religious text, narrations, the ayahs of the Quran, the commentary of the Quran, interpretation of the Quran and different hadith, sahih, mursal, like muwassaq, and all of this terminology, what is the number one question that every single one of us should, or better say must, be able to answer that? That was the fact or the question or the reality that why should even one bother with being religious? Why should even one have a faith? Can I just claim that I want to become like an extremely ethical person? I go based on ethical values, therefore I don't need to submit to any religion or any faith. A lot of people, they talk about this these days. When it comes to a matter of religion, the number one, or you can say among the top like criticism about religion, is the fact that they see some actions from those who are religious, and that goes like in opposite of what we call like ethical system, the moral values that we have. So this criticism gets raised. Do I have to go for a faith and religion while I see so many corruptions, I see so many actions that speak otherwise? Or no, can I just go for ethical values and do not worry about religion? Am I supposed to have a religion or not? If so, why, number one? And among all of the religions that are out there, if you just Google the term religions, I don't know how many different faith and religion will come up. Among all of the faith that we have, which one is, that perfect religion? The one that gives you the 100% result when you invest your time and your life in it. It was a majlis of tarhim, it was a majlis of remembering the deceased, right? So what do we usually gain from this majalis? One thing is good to see all the brothers and sisters come together, but at the same time, what do we take from the majlis in which is like it's been held in the memory of a newly deceased one? It's not a matter of the food, it's not a matter of even doing the Fatiha. The Fatiha goes to the deceased one, but what about the ones who are present? What are we supposed to get from this majlis, right? So that topic is highly close to the topic that I'm trying to actually make a discussion of. That why do I need as a person, as an individual, to have a religion? Can I just go basically and like work on myself on ethical values and like morals that I have and say, okay, that's enough for me. I don't need Islam, I don't need Christianity, I don't need Judaism, I don't need any revelation, right? I just think and I do whatever is good. I just think and do whatever I feel it's the right thing to do. I just think and do whatever I find out to be the right thing. What's wrong with that, ideology? What's wrong with that picture? You see, when it comes to ethical values, we say, it becomes of two categories. Some, when they go after ethical values, they tend to be more preservative. They tend to say, okay, just keep everything as is and try to have that peace and unity and tranquility between everybody just the way they are. We don't want to make any changes, right? Just keep them the way they are as long as they are with one another. Second approach, right, is more, you can say, liberal. They're looking for advancement. They're looking for reformation. They're looking for elevation, right, ethical values. So they say, no, I want the ethical values. At the same time, I want to make sure within this ethical values, I have this journey of perfection. I become better and better and better every day. Yes? So two different approaches. One is preservative. One is, in a sense, reformist. Now, both of them could have some common thing with the religious approach, could have some differences. It depends on which part of ethics actually we're looking at. So when we go back to the history of Islam, remember last night we talked about reason behind why Imam Al-Hussein, the grandson of Rasulullah, made his move. It was very simple notion. What was the notion? What was the phrase? To make islah fi ummat jaddi. To make reformation, better to say correction, better to say to fix up whatever was happening within the nation of my grandfather, Nabi Rasulullah. So that was the main objective, yes? So this sense of reformation, now take that from a religious aspect, apply it to the ethical value, aspect. If I only go according to what I perceive it's right or wrong, which to some extent is correct. We don't neglect the power of the brain or the innate nature that we have. No. We say every single person, if you go around and if you ask anybody, believer, non-believer, atheist, agnostic, Christian, Judaism, Muslim, if you ask them, is killing bad? They're going to say, yes. Is lying bad? They're going to say, yes. Is stealing bad? They're going to say, yes. Where is that coming from? Is it coming from their teachings? If it comes from their religion? If you ask an atheist, right, what would he say? Yes, because he thinks he goes back to the fundamentals that he has within himself, whatever brain system that he has chosen, right? And he acknowledges the fact that, for example, stealing or lying is bad. So why do I need a religion for? Is religion only telling me what I already know? The answer is no. The religion puts a confirmation on what our intellect can find out in terms of a good, bad, wrong, and the truth and falsehood. At the same time, it gives us that extra, the steps that we have to take in order to gain that perfection of that specific attribute. So for example, we talk about stealing or lying being bad. We talk about killing being bad. We talk about for example, an act of oppression being bad. But a lot of times we reach cases in which the mind, the brain as we speak of, cannot make a distinguish of which way is the right way and which way is the wrong way. The famous example, the easiest example, is the topic of sacrifice. According to the ethical value system, the topic of sacrifice does not show itself. Because in a way, when I'm trying to become an ethical person, I'm trying to become a better person. I am trying to become a better person. It's always about I. So no matter what I'm doing, in a way, I'm putting more into this I. I have become better. I have become I'm doing more stuff, more good stuff. I have donated this amount. I have done so many great deeds, right? It's I and I and I and I. The I becomes bigger, bigger, and bigger. The topic of sacrifice is exactly the opposite of this. Sacrifice is you're supposed to give up yourself. So if my I has become so great already, to the point that, when I walk on the earth, I walk the walk of the arrogance, then how am I going to go about the topic of sacrifice? So this topic of sacrifice, sacrificing for a good cause, it's one of the main or easiest example of where religion comes to play. So it draws that silver lining for us. It shows us that path towards perfection. Meaning when we go back in the history of Islam, we look at the movement of Imam Al-Hussein and why he went for it, number one, and why didn't he go alone? Why did he take all of the women and children? And not only his own direct family, but the family of all of the relatives, all of the Bani Hashim, literally. You can say 90% of Bani Hashim were going with Imam Al-Hussein, except a few, which, in some cases, Imam actually appointed them to stay back for different reasons. So if that's the path, and again, from a rational way of looking at this, it absolutely doesn't make sense. Because Imam already is informed of what's going to happen at the end. When Imam has a discussion with Muhammad ibn Hanafiya in the city of Medina, right? As the Imam is talking to him, first Muhammad ibn Hanafiya sort of gives this recommendation to the Imam, which Imam says, okay, let me think it over. So Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, we have it that he becomes happy because he thinks to himself, he assumes to himself that, okay, Imam al-Hussein is going to think about what I made suggestion, and he's not going to go towards Karbala because he's already part of this big picture, right? But then the news comes that early morning the Qadam of Imam al-Hussein is making a move out of the city. So he comes running after Imam al-Hussein at his age. He's much older than Imam al-Hussein. He comes running after Imam al-Hussein and he says, what happens? I thought we had a discussion last night. You were telling me that you're going to think it over. What changed? Imam al-Hussein ﷺ says a very simple thing. He said, I thought it over, but what came to me, what I saw was the message from Nabi Rasulullah telling me that Allah wants to see you killed. Allah wants to see your family and women being captive as prisoners. So here comes the topic of revelation. From logical aspect, it may sound like a suicide, but from revelation, it becomes the greatest of value. And this is what a lot of times our mind cannot calculate it. When our mind actually makes a confirmation and approves this act, when we look back after 1400 years and we see, mashallah, every year because of the very same act of Imam al-Hussein back in the days, people are getting enlightened. They're getting awakened towards what? Towards prosperity, towards the truth, towards the reality. So this becomes a sign. The very same argument that took place between Imam al-Sajjad and the man in Damascus or in Sham. He went up to Imam al-Sajjad while being in chain, and he asked him, he was trying to mock Imam al-Sajjad. He was saying, okay, who's the winner now? After everything has taken place, after everything has been done, the Ahlul Bayt are within the chain and they're within the custody. He goes up to Imam al-Sajjad and says, well, who's the winner now? What does Imam al-Sajjad says? He answers only again one simple sentence. Listen to the azan before your prayer. Are you saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah? He says, yes. He says, now you tell me who has won. Meaning the basis of religion becomes the value when it comes to make that move. So back to our argument, can I only be or can I only define myself and limit myself to ethical values as I find them to be the right and wrong? The answer is that only gives you a partial of the way, right? And in a sense, like when we talk about religion, the religion tells us exactly the opposite way of the purpose. So when I go only for ethical values, I'm trying to make myself stronger. And that's what we see in a lot of different spiritual faith and approaches these days. People go after it. Why? Because they're seeking for this sense of immortal, or you can say unseen power. They like to have karamat. They like to say this thing and move the stuff. They like to say this thing from here to go to another place. Do all of this miraculous works. It's power, right? They like to be all of these figures that we may hear about them here and there. So it has attraction. So they go after it, and they go after gaining these specific teachings, right? Just to make sure that they gain this sense of, let's say extreme power, like supernatural powers. But when we look at the religion, when we look at the teachings of the Imam, when we look at the teachings of the Quran, we see the objective is completely 100% opposite. Where, when that sort of like a monk, or you can say a yogi, he goes to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, and there is a discussion between them. He says, I have heard, the yogi tells the Imam al-Sadiq, he says, I have heard that you can tell you have the knowledge of the divine, you have the knowledge of the unseen. I have the very same knowledge that you have. And I have come to test you to see whether your knowledge is higher or my knowledge is higher. Look at the argument, your knowledge versus my knowledge, yes? Imam al-Sadiq tells him, you say you have the knowledge of the unseen? Okay, you want to test me, or should I test you first? He says, no, you go ahead and test me. Imam says, what do you want me to ask you? He says, just ask me whatever you want, and I'll tell you where the position of that thing is, right? So Imam asks him, okay, what is this thing, or where is this thing? And he keeps on telling all of the direction. Imam says, okay, do you want to ask me a question? He says, no, you ask one more question. So what should I ask? He says, just ask me, hide something in your hand, and don't tell me what it is. I will tell you where did you get it from, and for example, what is it in your hand, in what quantity, in what quality. Imam hides something in his hand. The first time he answers it correctly. He says, you got some egg from somewhere, and you're holding it in your hand. Imam says, okay. He takes something else. He says, okay, now tell me, what am I holding in my hand? No matter how hard he tries to think and think and think and think and think, nothing comes up. Imam is looking at him. It's like, I thought you said you have the knowledge of the unseen. What am I holding in my hand? Keeps on thinking and thinking and thinking. Doesn't know the answer. So he finally admits. He sensed that higher sense of power. Something is blocking his knowledge. So he asks the question in a humbleness, right? He becomes humble at the presence of the Imam. What is it that you're holding? Imam opens his palm. What is he holding? The turbat of Sayyid al-Shahadat. A piece of soil, right? And he was not able to see it. So he says, what is this turba? What is this soil? It cannot be a unique, it's not. Imam said, no, it's turba, it's a soil. It's a piece of let's say dust. So then he realized that no, there's something higher involved here. So he wants to make a submission. What does Imam al-Sadiq tell him? He says, if you make a submission because you're telling your soul, your ego and your nafs to submit to the will of Allah, all of the things that you have gained will be washed away. You have to start your life just like any other normal person. He says, I'm ready. He makes a submission. He submits to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the path of ethical value, two major differences when you say from the path of a religious aspect. Number one, the means that they use, to what extent they go. Number two, the objective that they follow. So in terms of the means, our brain, the ethical system that we follow, it only sees so much. When it comes to the matter of, for example, giving up ourselves for the sake of a good cause, it stumbles. That's one. Number two, when it comes to the objective, to the purpose, ethical values is about how I make myself better, so that myself still remains there. Versus the religious aspect, religious approach, it focuses on obedience. It focuses on ibadah, like how to submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the path in which the myself becomes less and less and less and less. So that's one of the signs that the ulama, the scholars, they mention. When you go to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein, the sign that you have actually benefited from that majlis is like when you walk in, by the time you walk out, you feel extra sense of being humble at the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You feel this extra sense of being, or having this tawadu, right? You look within, like deep down, and you make the comparison, you have less of like concentration on yourself by the time that you walk out from the majlis of Imam al-Hussein. And this is a criterion that Nabi Rasulullah mentioned to his ashab, to his companion. A common argument. They were telling Nabi Rasulullah, they were going to him and they were saying, oh Nabi Rasulullah, we have this hypocrisy within us. Nabi Rasulullah told them, why do you say hypocrisy? Why do you say nifaq? He says, when we are with you at the same majlis, all we think is good. All we think is to do good. The minute, the second we leave your presence and we go out of the majlis, the whole thing changes back. All we think is the dunya. How to cheat one another, how to like steal from one another, how to lie, right? The minute it's one step. And I usually make this example. You go to the shrines of the Ahlul Bayt, right? One step from outside to the inside. In terms of a physical distance, is not much. It's one step. Why do people all of a sudden change when they enter, the physical space of the shrine? Huh? One step. How many, like how length or how long is one step? Same question they were asking from Nabi Rasulullah. When we are with you, alhamdulillah, all we think is good, to do good, to be good, to gain for that for perfection. The minute we step outside, everything changes. So they were claiming, they were like blaming themselves of hypocrisy. Nabi Rasulullah told them, no, that's not hypocrisy. That's normal. You have to work on it. The stuff you gain when you're at this, like let's say at a majlis, where like you gain like these teachings, we're supposed to maintain it. We're supposed to keep it with ourselves. We cannot just like hear from one ear in and like out from the other. No, I'm supposed to take something with myself. Remember last night we talked about how many different lectures we have heard over and over and over and over again. So how much of these lectures have I, as a person, like as a believer, as a faithful person, have I been able to practice? I'm sure everybody here knows lying is bad. Anybody has doubt about that? But go around and do a research on this from like those who are like non-religious or even non-Muslims. They ask them, what are the number one criteria, the signs that you may actually say a person is a Muslim, especially the ones who have gone back to the Middle East. One of the number one they think about the Muslimin and Muslimat is that they lie. They lie. Does anybody here has doubt that lying is bad? Anybody here has a doubt that lying is haram, is forbidden? The number one sign for Muslims from non-Muslims is that they lie. It's not my words. Go look at the statistics. Go look at the research. The very first thing they say, it's like, oh, Muslim country? No, they lie. You cannot trust them, right? So what's wrong? What's missing? For so many years, alhamdulillah, we've been going to the majlis. We have not been able to take one thing. So maybe as a community, that's one of the ways to go about this. Every month or every year, I'll make it even simple. Every year as we enter the month of Muharram, we put up one simple value, one simple, let's say, like, act that for this year as a community, we want to make sure we give up this, sinful, this, like, wrongful act. We want to give up, like, ghiba this year. We want to give up lying this year. We want to give up, like, mockery and making fun at each other this year. We want to like give up talking behind each other's back. Every year, 1 year. And help one another to make sure that that character, like, stays with us. That's the whole meaning of community. The community is not to just come down, sit and say Salamun Alaikum and get up and go say Fi Amanillah. No, that's not community, right? A community has to be alive, has to have a spirit. That spirit has to be growing. If it's only going at the same stop of saying salam and fi amanillah, that's not a community, right? And that's why we see at the time of Nabi Rasulullah, I mean, make a comparison between his time and the time of, the first three, or even between his time and the time of the Muawiyah. You see how much values changes? We look at the ashab in the time of Nabi Rasulullah, they were giving up everything they could. In one of the ghazawat, in one of the battles, as they were about to give water to the wounded ones, because the person who gets wounded, as more blood comes out, they get thirstier. So they want a lot of water. So the guy who had water, he goes to the first one who was wounded. He wants to give him water. He says, go to the second brother who's who's hit the ground a little bit farther from me. He's more thirsty than I am. He got he got hit before me. So the guy goes to the second person. The second person says, no, go to that third brother who's laying down there. He got hit before I did. So he deserves the water. He's wounded. He goes to the third brother. He finds him. He's already passed away. He has become shaheed. He comes back to the second brother, right? And he finds him. He has become shaheed too. He goes back to the first one, the original one. He finds him shaheed as well. So it's like constant sacrifice without anybody telling them, without anybody messaging them, without anybody asking them, right? Constant sacrifice, as if they were competing one another. And we see this quality within the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada as well, right? With the ashab, I'm not even talking about the Bani Hashim. You look at, for example, Abbas. Abbas is known for his courage, for his shaja'ah, right? To the point that he literally removes his armor when he goes to fight. I mean, who would remove an armor when he wants to fight? When you want to fight, you make sure you have extra set of armor, right? To make sure you get less of the heat. He removes the armor, but before that, he has this pal, this friend, this buddy, in which they have this rafiq, and they known each other for such a long time. Before going to the battlefield, he asks him, and he says, if you can go before me. What's the usual understanding? The friend, he starts to joke with them. It's like, what, you want me to go and get killed before you? Before, there is no, first and second. We all going to be, become shaheed. So why are you asking me to go before you? He says, no. You see this man here? He has brought his entire family. And, soon he will be losing every single one of those family members. Me as a companion, I just want to have one slight of sympathy with him before I actually give up my life for him. So I want to taste the pain of losing a dear friend right in front of my eyes. By bearing this pain, I want to, share my sympathy with Imam al-Hussein. And he's, mashallah, known for his courage. So he sends his friend first, and then he goes for the battle. As I said, they're not attacking him because they're afraid of him. They don't know what to do. He removes his armor. He says, if you're afraid of me, I even remove my armor. And they still don't attack him. They start doing a circle. They surround him, and they start throwing stuff at him. That's how they actually get to him, right? So constant sacrifice, constant seeing that higher cause, constant seeing that element of perfection, constant forgetting about the ego and the self and what's in it for me. Do we have the same spirit when it comes to our majalis? Right? It's a very simple question we can ask ourselves. Not to point fingers at others, no. Again, talk about our own selves. If I claim to be the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, the follower, we always say the follower of the Ahlul Bayt, the definition is there. What's the definition of Shia? Follower. What's the meaning of follower in English? Everybody knows. Follower is the one who follows. If I claim to be a Shia, if I claim to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, yet again, when I look at the actions completely speak otherwise. Then literally I'm actually committing a lie every single time I say I'm a Shia. Again, not my words, the words of our Imams. Imam al-Hassan, if I'm not mistaken, Imam al-Hussein, Imam al-Sajjad, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Rida. I think these 5 Imams, I could be mistaken on 1 or 2, but they have mentioned this specifically, right? The story of Imam al-Rida and the companions who come, and they claim to be the Shias Amir al-Mu'mineen, followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Imam al-Rida, who's known for his ra'fa, who's known to be merciful, he does not allow them come inside. They have come all the way from Medina to where? To Marv. You know how long is the journey in that time? Imam does not allow him in. 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 times, 60 times they go back and forth, they knock on the door, they introduce themselves as the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The servant goes to Imam al-Raza, Imam al-Raza, who is behind the door? He says they're the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Imam says, do not allow them in. How is that possible? So finally, they reach a stage that they become Mustar. They say, okay, if we go back, our community is there, they're not going to accept us because we have come all this way to ask questions, and at the same time, we didn't have a chance to actually see the Imam. What should we do? They go and they ask the servant, any way that you can talk to the Imam for us. I mean, we've been here for like literally 2 months. The servant goes to the Imam and sort of tells them that they have no other choices. They have to go back. At the same time, they have so many questions. They're begging to at least know why, Imam is not allowing them to come inside. Imam says, okay, now let them come in. They come inside. From the etiquettes of being a host is to offer a seat when you have when you have a guest. Imam al-Raza does not even offer them a seat. In the report actually says they say salam. Imam does not even return their salam because he's angry at them. He wants to make a point. He makes them stand up right there. He says, what's your question? They ask how come what we have done that you have not accepted us. Imam says, in what you say, Shia to Ali ibn Abi Talib, do you know who is the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Then Imam starts to give example. Salman is the Shia, Miqdad is the Shia, Ammar was the Shia, Malik ibn Ashtar was the Shia. I look at you, I don't see a single sign of being a Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why do you use the term? So they say, but we have this love, we have this affection, we have this hub. Imam Raza says, at least call yourself the muhib of the Ahlul Bayt, muhib of Amir al-Mu'mineen, muhib of Imam al-Hussein, even muhib of the muhibbeen of Imam al-Hussein, right? And then Imam mentions that, just by saying this title, that I am a Shia of, let's say, such and such, literally you're making a lie in which you will have the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on yourself. So do yourself a favor, don't at least use this title. Now question, what do we recite in Ziyarat of Ashura every day? Look at some of the phrases that we do. Allahumma la'an awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa akhira tabi'in lahu ala dhalik. Akhira tabi'in lahu ala dhalik. If I have made an oppressive act on that day and I'm reciting this verse from the Ziyarat of Ashura, who am I cursing? And what are some of the examples of oppression? Lying is one of them, right? So if I had lied on that day and I come to the masjid and I recite Ziyarat of Ashura, what am I doing? I'm cursing my own self. So again, akhlaqi ulamas, they say, always make a repentance before we recite Ziyarat of Ashura for the sake of this reason. Constantly we're doing oppressive act. Constantly we're doing different actions. Constantly we are sinning. At the same time, we're seeking the best of the best. But what we're saying, we're literally we're putting a curse on ourselves, right? So different path between going after ethical values without the religion and going and doing this journey within the context of religion. Now as we're getting closer and closer to the Shahadat of our second beloved Imam, Imam Al-Hassan al-Mustafa alayhi salatu wassalam, let's go and have a look at his beautiful life. Because by far we can say 2 of our Imams are among the most mazlumin. One is Imam Al-Hassan al-Mustafa, the other one Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salatu wassalam. Why? Because mashallah we have Amir al-Mu'mineen, then we have Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. They are between these 2 mashallahs, right? So you ask any of the younger ones, they have so many stories from Amir al-Mu'mineen and they know so much about Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. But you ask them to tell me something about Imam al-Hassan al-Mustafa. You ask them to tell me something about Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salatu wassalam. Ask them to tell me something about Imam al-Baghir. Imam al-Sadiq, they may know some, and again the rest of the Imams. And you'll be surprised. At the same time, when we look at their life, we see that mashallah is filled with different examples, different contexts, different lectures within the different circumstances. So everybody can find some point of references when it comes to the life of the Imams. For example, Imam Al-Hassan al-Mustafa, we usually talk about the one common thing, the peace treaty. Before understanding the peace treaty, we have to understand the circumstances. What was the circumstances in which Imam al-Hassan became the Imam? I'll give you a hint. What was Amir al-Mu'mineen basically crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for on the very last years of his life? He was only governing for 4.5 years, right? At the very last minute, very last, like let's say months of his governing, he literally was crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah take me from this people. Why was Amir al-Mu'mineen is doing this prayer? Why? And the very same people, the very same crowd, they were giving, they were like, paying their allegiance to follow the imamat and the leadership of Imam Al-Hassan. So this is how we understand the circumstances. The very same crowd that no matter how hard Amir al-Mu'mineen sat on the minbar on the masjid of Kufa, and who else can we find that to be ma'soom, be infallible, and to be the has most amount of, like, let's say, literacy when it comes to the matter of the public speaking. We cannot find anybody who's going to be better than Amir al-Mu'mineen, yes? He gives all of these sermons, and what do people do? One is sleeping, one is looking the other way, one is looking at his tablet, one is looking at his cell phone at that time, right? One is thinking about his farm, one is thinking about his women, one is thinking about his land, one is thinking about, right? Constantly, Imam is trying to make them motivated to go and fight Muawiyah for the second time. Not a single one is ready to go. And all of the elites, they've been, they have become shaheed already. Malik Ashta has become shaheed. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr has become shaheed. Ammar Yasin has become shaheed, right? So the elites are gone. The mass have remained, and the mass do not give in to the words and the teachings of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The very same crowd, they come and they do the bay'ah with Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba. So you can see the lack of support already. And what's the first move that Imam al-Hassan does? Again, he forms everybody, right, to go and do the same jihad that Amir al-Mu'mineen was pushing for. Go and make sure you take care of Muawiyah once for all. What happens? They set up this army camp, right, for people to join, for soldiers to join, for the army to get formed. As Imam al-Hassan makes his way from city of Kufa to reach the army camp of himself, before even reaching the army camp, he gets, assassinated, but, a false attempt. Before getting to his own army camp, right, by the very same people who were doing bay'ah. So in this situation, what would you do? So when you talk about a peace treaty, the number one thing may come to the mind is that, a peace treaty, that doesn't go with the courage. It's actually exact the opposite. Courage, sometimes we can express it. Let's say in the battlefield, in the ring of fighting, right? You get one punch, you hit one punch. You try to show your courage by literally fighting your opponent. Sometimes you have the power, you have the ability, right? And the history talks about it. At the same time, you're supposed to hold that anger within you. One of the mustashriqin, he mentions a very good point. He says, there is one point about the history of Islam that when I read it, I want to become a Muslim. What is that portion? He says, when the history narrates that they took Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib from his house to the masjid, tying a piece of rope around his arms. Why? He says, because when you go back a couple of years back, you see he's the very same Ali ibn Abi Talib who opened up the door of Khaybar with one hand. The door of Khaybar, which 17 people had to push together, right, to open. He opened it up with one hand and he used it as a shield. Then he throws it over the Khandaq and he makes a bridge. How is that possible for that man, the very same man with that much power, to be, have his hands tied up with a piece of rope, and they drag him to the masjid while they do, that disrespectful act to his wife, with that being said. Just by this notion of a historical fact, we understand who is, haq, who is telling the truth. Because he was ordered specifically by Nabi Rasulullah to be patient during the time of calamities, right? So here's when that akhlaqi approach and the religious approach, they contradict one another. Akhlaqi approach says, hey, you have the power, use it. Use it for the sake of a good cause. The religion aspect says otherwise. Religion aspect always tells us, no, there is a higher form of understanding, which we refer to as revelation. That revelation talks about the reality as is, not what I understand. What I understand is a mixture of a lot of different stuff. A lot of stuff that comes to our mind, the paradigms that we have, the perspective that we have, the view that we have, the way we make decisions. If you further analyze and dissect this, we see that a lot of them are basically based on nothing. I make a decision based on nothing, what we refer to as hawa. Hawa, a good translation for hawa is based on nothing, right? And I humbly suggest this for all of the brothers, to go back and sometimes think about why did I make this decision, and try to further analyze it. Go to the main roots. A lot of times we say, oh, there is no reason for it. I just did it. I don't even know why. It comes from that hawa. It's based on nothingness. Can we build a castle in the sky over the cloud? No matter how hard we try? No, we have to make sure the foundation is first ready, is solid, then we start building. That's the topic of religion. Why religion and which religion? Once we answer these two, then we talk about, okay, how I can practice the religion. If all of these are taken for granted, the problems that we have, the people like me, because I say, okay, I was born as a Muslim, so I'll take everything for granted. I'll go and do some of the rituals, some of the deeds, but I don't even know what am I doing. I go for the ziyarat, but on the way of ziyarat, I do so many haqqun nas, so many oppressive acts while I'm reciting the ziyarat of Ashura on the path towards ziyarat. So think about it. I'm trying to disclaim myself from the act of oppression. At the same time, I'm doing the oppression while disclaiming myself from the act of oppression, right? Or I go to the masjid of Imam Al-Hussein, the same thing. It always comes back to that basic, fundamental thing within the religion, that we try to make sure to stay within the boundaries of religion. So at the time of Imam Al-Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam, with the circumstances in which he takes the imamat, with absolutely not a single follower to stand behind him. Sometimes we talk about Muslim ibn Aqil and how he became alone. When we look at the story of Imam Al-Hassan, we see that he was even more lonelier than Muslim ibn Aqil. At least Muslim ibn Aqil, close to 18,000 people, they did allegiance to him in the masjid of Kufa, and one by one they started, of leaving him behind, to the point that not a single one was behind him after he was about to exit the masjid. But Imam Al-Hassan, no, one of his commanders, right, who is known for his for his courage, basically. And he was in charge of close to 12,000 army horsemen. He, along with 10,000 of them, on the night before the battle, all of them go to the side of Muawiyah. For the sake of what? For 10,000 dinar. Just like that, they switch sides. So many of these people that constantly switch sides, right? If the money is more and more, sometimes they offer us something less, sometimes they offer us a little bit more, sometimes it's not even a matter of money, sometimes it's something that we like. We get ready to make that change. We get ready to flip, as they say. So learning this lesson from the time of Imam Al-Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam is number one thing. Our duty towards the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always stays within that fundamental boundaries of religion. No matter what happens, I'm supposed to stay within the boundaries of religion. Don't give in to the peer pressure. Don't give in to the say, oh, I felt shy, right? The non-mahram came to do a handshake with me, and I felt like, okay, if I do a handshake, they're going to feel this way and that way. Well, it's simple as placing your hand on your chest, say, I'm sorry, it's not you, but it's me. And it's a common thing, right? Don't feel sorry about taking a bottle of water when you want to use the bathroom for tahara. It's a bottle of water. Don't say, oh no, they're going to have all of this talks about me, they're going to have all of this judgment about me, right? We're talking about taking a bottle of water for tahara. So, long journey, inshallah. What are the steps to take? Number one, stay within the boundary. Number two, the tawassul. Constantly go back and do the tawassul on the Ahlul Bayt, inshallah. Among the Ahlul Bayt, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. When we talk about the tie and the bond between the two brothers, Imam Al-Hassan and Imam Al-Hussein, it's interesting when we look at the rawayat. In most of the rawayat, they talk about both of them together. The ayah that I recited talks about abna'ana wa abna'akum. This bond between the two brothers, and we see the signs of it in the maqatil when, for example, Qasim ibn al-Hassan goes to ask for permission to go for the battlefield. The maqatil has that Imam al-Hussein just only looked at Qasim ibn al-Hassan. He embraced him, faqasha, when both of them, they fainted out. It shows how severe and how sincere this bond was between Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. They say on the very last minutes and hours of the beloved life of Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba, Imam al-Hussein goes to the room and he sees his brother laying down. The face has already turned pale. There is this big, let's say, dish or a bowl in front of the Imam al-Hassan, and every so often Imam has this sense of vomiting, and when he vomits, pieces of like dried, perhaps you can say blood, is coming out from his mouth to that dish in front of the Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba. When Imam al-Hussein sees the scene, he burst out to tears. And as he's crying, Imam al-Hassan starts to cry. He says, "Oh brother, why are you crying?" Imam al-Hussein says, "I'm crying for you, for being poisoned, for being all alone, for being gharib, for being mazloom." Imam al-Hassan stops him. He says, "Oh Hussein, don't cry for me. La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. I may be poisoned, I may be all alone, I may be gharib, I may be mazloom, but oh brother, there will come that 30,000 people, they will line up just to not only kill you, but to kill 17 members of the Bani Hashim, to kill all of the Ashab. Oh Hussein, they have gathered around to make sure that they take every single women and children as captive and as asir from Karbala to Kufa to Sham. Oh Hussein, don't cry for me. Wait for that day. Wait for the 10th of Ashura. Wait when you go back to say your last farewell to the women of children. Usually raise your voice and say, "Alaykunna minni as-salam." Oh Zainab, oh Kulthum, oh Sakina, oh Ruqayya, Haza, this is my last farewell to you. As they say, Imam al-Hussein wanted to go. The horse doesn't move. The Zuljanah does not move. Imam al-Hussein looks down. He looks to the left side. There is nothing blocking the way. He looks to the right side of the horse. He sees that Bibi Sukaina is standing there right in front of the horse. That is why the horse is not moving. Imam al-Hussein says, "What is it, my dear one? Why can't you move aside? You know where I'm supposed to go." Bibi Sukaina says, "Oh father, not like this. You on the horse, me on the ground. If you can, get down from the horse. I have to tell you something. Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, this is happening at the eve of Ashura." And that stage gets down from the horse. "Yes, what is it, my dear one?" "Oh Imam, oh Baba, I want you to embrace me. I want you to hug me." "Okay, my dear one, come." And he gives a hug to Bibi Sukaina for last time. She says, "No, Baba, not like this. Put my head over your shoulder. Make sure you take your hand and you tie it over my hair. Make sure you gently petty my head." Imam al-Hussein says, "Oh Sukaina, what are you doing with my heart? As if you want me to give up my soul right now?" Bibi Sukaina says, "Oh Baba, oh Abba, no, this is not the case. Remember on the 3rd of Muharram, when the news of the Shahadat of Muslim ibn Aqil reached you in the caravan, what did you do on that day? The very first thing you did, you asked for the orphans of Muslim ibn Aqil. You called him in and you said to them that I'll be your father from now. I'll be your guardian. I'll be taking care of you. Anything you need, I will provide provide for you, and you embraced them. You petted on their head, you petted them, and you made sure that they were comfortable. Oh, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, as you go, what's going to happen to us? As you go, who's going to take us back to Medina? Oh, Imam al-Hussein, as you go, have you seen this, guys? They have done this to Ali Akbar. They have done this and this to Abul Fazl al-Abbas. They have done this and this to Qasim. They have done this to Ali and al-Asghar. Oh, Aba Abdullah, if you go, what are they going to do with us, which we are only women and children? لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم إلهي بحق محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين وتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين يا الله 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 اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره اللهم ارحم أمواتنا واشف أمراضنا واجعل عاقبة الأمور خيرا. Oh Allah, on the right of Imam al-Hussein and the right of Imam al-Hassan, we'll ask you to hasten the appearance of Imam of time and to give us all the blessings of becoming part of his true companions. Oh Allah, we'll ask you to extend your mercy upon all of us and upon all of the marhumin and marhumat. Oh Allah, will ask you to provide cure and shifa for all of the sick ones. Oh Allah, will ask you to answer the hawaij of mu'mineen and mu'minat. Oh Allah, will ask you to accept this majalis from us and to grant us the tawfiq of the ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt in this dunya and the benefits of their shafa intercession in the hereafter. Oh Allah, will ask you on the right of Imam al-Hussein not to leave us for ourselves even for the slightest of seconds. رحم الله من قرأ فاتحة مع الصلوات.
جزاكم الله خير الجزاء. ولي على المسموم ولي على ولي على المسموم ولي على صوتك ولي على المسموم 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 ولي على بارك الله بك. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء دين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل يلا صوتك ما شاء الله بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم يلا صوتك. ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. الليلة ليلة جبرائيل الليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم والحسن أمس جبرائيل ناسج مدمعي بنار المصايب يحوم بالسبع العوالي بلهجتي الآغات ذايب. وأمسى كوكب لي المحاسن عن سمح كامل يا غايب. وأمسى كوكب لي المحاسن عن سما الأحكام غايب. بغياب آدم من صيديع ونوح بمصعب ومن فيجيع. وأمسى الخليل بهالواضع وقلبي بن عمران لاهب. وقلبي بن عمران لاهب. عيسى بن مريم بالحزن مضروم للنبي واسي والحسن مسموم. الليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن مسموم. الليلة جبرائيل ما شاء الله والحسن الليلة أمست عالخلايق ليلة مشؤومة ورهيبة للغري الأملاك نزلت لكني بحالة غريبة تواسي حيدر بالمصاب اللي يقطع تواسي حيدر بالمصاب واللي قطع كبدة حبيبه هالليلة فطر يسمين ويجل وميكايل المدمع يهيل بالحزن صاع ميتصيل وخذت دير دايل ريبه دمعة إسرافيل فايضة من دموم الحيدر يواسو والحسن مسموم ليلة جبرائيل ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم صوتك ما شاء الله والحسن مسموم ليلة جبرائيل ليلة جبرائيل بس والحسن جابر الكاظمي الليلة ليلة حزين دامس والقبر محتار بأمره الليلة ليلة حزين دامس والقلب محتار بأمره من ألم جرحي اللي صابه بعد ما يمتلك صبره اش يصبري وشاهدي الحرم نهي الحزن تسكب لعبره حوا نزيلت متراويعة ومريم تحن بالفاجعة وكبدت خديجة مقطعة وآسيا بلوعة الزهرة زينب تنادي من قلب معلوم يواسن الزهراء والحسن مسموم ليلة جبرائيل بالسماء يحوم ينعى روح الدين والحسن همستي الخمسة الأصول مصاوبة بمنهج شريعها وظهر على القرآن حزنه والسوار فايض دميعها والفروع امست حزينه والصلاة عزت ركعها والحزين على المبدأ ظهار والمصحف عزي السوار كبد الحسن من انفطار تغيرت الدنيا وضيعها تغيرت الدنيا وضيعها تصرخ الآيات والشرع مهضوم والعقيدة تنوح والحسن مسموم الليلة ليلة جبرا ما شاء الله ينعى روح الدين يا معذبها وكبير السادة، يا معذبها وكبير السادة، تنزل أملاك السماء وفادة، تنزل أملاك السماء وفادة. يا الحسن يا ابني الحسن والبسملة، يا المضيفك أصل كلمة يا هلا، طباع عندك مالحة ومعدلة، والكرم عندك سجية وعادة، والكرم عندك سجية وعادة. بابك تنوخ رجايبها وتحط، يطب ديوانك رهط يطلع رهط، بينها مساوي مثل سن المشط، وتنطي فوق الرايدين زيادة، تنطي فوق الرايدين. لسانك من أهلا وسهلا ما يجل، وعلى غيرك بالكرم ما تنتجل. يا المضيفك كان مو بس للأجل، مبخت بي للقصد ينطي مراده، مبخت بي للقصد ينطي مراده. زادك يوصفون للعلة دواء، زادك يوصفون للعلة دواء، وذهب تنطب وقت ما يحصل نوى. يا ابو دلال الحارة تنطق هوا، شبع الطير الله، الشبع طير بالسما من زاده، الشبع طير بالسما من الشبع طير بالسما من. بابك بحياهم الله من فرش، اللي يشسمهم لعد كبدك ينتهش. سددوا 70 نبل على النعش، خصمك هنا بين بأحقاده، خصمك هنا بين. صاحت المعيد هوي جدك وفا، صاحت المعيد هوي جدك وفا، لا تدفنون بجوار المصطفى. صاحبوا فاضل على الدنيا العفا، أسد سلل سيف من غماده، أسد سمعك. صاحت المعد هوي جدك وفا، صاحت المعد هوي جدك وفا، لا تدفنون بجوار المصطفى. صاحبوا فضل على الدنيا العفا، أسد سلل سيف من غماده، أسد سلل. حسين رد وضم ما بين الجفوف، قال سيفك عازته بيوم الطفوف. هناك تاخذ ثارهم طش الصفوف، موتك على النهر ربك راده، موتك على النهر. يا الحسن وبكربلاء تدري ايش جرى، يا الحسن وبكربلاء تدري ايش جرى. حسين ذبحوا بعد 7 القنطرة، زينب اخذوها بهزيلة ميسرة. عليكم هواي الزمان تماده، عليكم هواي الزمان. يا الحسن وبكربلاء تدري ايش جرى. حسين ذبحوا بعد 7 القنطرة، زينب اخذوها بهزيلة ميسرة. عليكم هواي الزمان تماده، عليكم. بارك الله بيك، جزاكم الله خير الجزاء. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء، 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. إلهي بالحسن الزكي شاف مرضانا، يسر أمورنا، آمنا في أوطاننا، لتعجيل في فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة تسبقها الصلوات.